4 seconds. That's all it took, the night before my wedding.
She's old cargo.
I didn't cry, walked away smiling. I took back everything. In 4 seconds 4 seconds standing outside a hotel door, the night before my wedding.
She's old cargo, too timid to ever ask questions.
Most women would have collapsed right there. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't even knock.
I fixed my dress and walked away smiling.
By sunrise, using nothing but this folder, a plate of soup, and one signature he never bothered to read Vide, I took back everything I ever gave him.
This isn't a story about a woman who got humiliated. This is the smartest, coldest decision I ever made. In 4 seconds.
Stay till the end. What I did with that folder, nobody sees it coming.
Before I tell you what Chica did, you need to understand who Chica was. Second of 4 children. Born in Enugu to a civil engineer father and a school principal mother. The kind of household where a girl was raised to believe her sharpest asset wasn't her face, it was her mind. And Chica never once apologized for having both. She left for Lagos at 22 with an accounting degree and an ambition that refused to speak quietly. By 28, she had her own financial consultancy running out of a small office in Victoria Island. By 30, she had 2 apartments in Lekki. Bought with her own money, not gifted, not inherited. A commercial plot of land in Abia, her father helped her secure, and minority shares in a construction firm through her uncle's network. She wasn't flashy about any of it. Modest clothes. A sensible car. She lived in one of her own Lekki apartments while the second quietly earned her rental income every single month. She was the kind of woman who built in silence and let the results speak for her. But here's the part that matters for what comes later. She had also spent most of her adult life being told, in one form or another, that she was too much, too serious, too focused, too intimidating for the average man to sit across from without feeling smaller. Men came. Men left. None of them stayed long enough to matter. Until Obinna. They met in 2015 at the funeral of a mutual friend's father. He was sitting alone under a mango tree at the edge of the compound, a paper cup of water in his hand, looking. She'd later tell her sister, like a man attending his own burial. He was 30, and he had just lost everything. His logistics company, 4 years of work, built from nothing, had collapsed 6 months earlier after a business partner emptied the accounts and vanished. Gone was his savings, his car, his apartment. He'd moved back in with his mother. He'd scraped together bus fare just to attend this funeral, because the man being buried had mentored him years before, and he believed in honoring the people who once believed in him. Chica sat beside him only because every other seat was taken. They talked for 4 hours. Not about big things, about small things, about what it feels like to lose everything and not know which direction to face next. He spoke to her with a rawness she'd never heard from a man before, like he had no energy left to perform strength, so he simply told the truth instead. She found that beautiful. That evening, she told her sister Adaez, "I met a man today who actually talks like a human being." Adaez said, "Chica, be careful." She wasn't careful. She was 31, and for the first time in a long time, something felt like finally. They started dating 3 months later. Obi moved back to Lagos, staying in his cousin's boys' quarters while he tried to rebuild. And Chica, without being asked, decided she would help him. Not loudly. Not in a way that made him feel small. Quietly. Strategically. Like a woman who understood that a man's pride is as fragile as glass and twice as important to protect. She introduced him to contacts. She restructured his business plan with the same precision she gave her paying clients. When his loan application was rejected, she personally guaranteed it with her own assets and let him believe the bank had simply changed its mind. By year 4, his company was growing again. And that's when Chica did the thing her lawyer would later describe simply as the one thing. She began putting his name on her properties. The first Lekki apartment, joint ownership. Then the second. Then the Abia land. Then, just last year, co-director of her own consulting firm. On the advice of her accountant, who said it would help their taxes once they were married. She never wanted Obi to feel like a visitor inside the life they were building. She never wanted him to stand in what she'd built and feel like a stranger in someone else's house. That was her logic. That, in her mind, was love. Her lawyer. Barrister Amaka Easy, a sharp woman from Imo State who'd handled her affairs for 6 years and seen more Lagos engagements than she could count, asked her once, quietly, while preparing the co-ownership paperwork, "Chica, are you absolutely certain about this?" "Yes," Chica said. Amaka prepared the documents and kept the rest of her thoughts to herself. 2 years ago, Obi proposed. A small private dinner, No crowd, no performance for social media. He reached across the table, took her hand, and said, "Chica, you make me want to be the man I always told myself I was going to become. Marry me." He didn't even get on one knee. She didn't notice. Her eyes were already too full. Their mothers met. Wedding planning began. Obi's mother, a precise, round woman from Nui who wore lace like a declaration, was pleasant enough on the surface. She smiled at Chica with the calibrated warmth of a woman still deciding whether you were useful. After the first family meeting, Adai sat with Chica at her kitchen table and said quietly, "I can't explain it. Something about that woman makes my stomach tight. You just don't know her yet," Chica said. Adai said nothing else. She loved her sister. She knew when to stop pushing. The wedding was set for a Saturday in March, in Port Harcourt, Obi's home state. 350 guests. Reception at a 5-star hotel. And Chica paid for most of it, unasked, because his company hadn't yet reached wedding-scale profit, and she wasn't the kind of woman who'd let the biggest day of her life shrink to fit someone else's budget. It was the night before the wedding. Chica was walking down the hotel corridor toward Obi's suite when she heard his voice through the door. Mid-call, mid-laugh, talking to his mother. "Mama, I'm telling you, just calm down. She's old cargo. 37 years old. No man ever wanted to marry her before me. She should be grateful I agreed to this wedding." A pause. "By this time tomorrow, she'll be my wife. And what's mine stays mine. The Lecky property, the apartments, the shares, the Abia land. Everything already in my name stays in my name. Everything's still in her name. I'll transfer after the wedding. She can't say no to her husband. That's the law." A low, satisfied laugh. "And Mama, don't worry about the women. A man like me can't be caged. I'll be discreet. She's too timid to even ask questions. That's why I chose her." Chica stood there. 4 seconds. Just 4. Then she straightened her spine, pulled the door fully shut without a sound, turned, and walked back down that hallway in her heels, smiling at a passing hotel attendant like the world was still perfectly intact. It was not intact. But Chica Odilio Okafor never fell apart where anyone could see it. She rode the elevator down, crossed the lobby, smiled at the concierge, stepped outside into the Port Harcourt night, and stood beside a potted palm tree at the hotel entrance. And there, finally, privately, she broke. 2 minutes. Hard. Silent. The kind of crying that makes no sound because the grief is too large to fit through a throat. She cried for the woman who once sat beside a broken man under a mango tree and saw potential where the rest of the world saw wreckage. She cried for 9 years of loan guarantees never mentioned, property signed away out of love, doors opened with her own name so he could walk through first. She cried because tomorrow was supposed to be the beginning of the life she'd earned, and instead, she was standing outside a hotel, coming apart beside a plant, the night before her own wedding. 2 minutes. Then she wiped her face with the hem of her dress. Breathed once, low, from her stomach. The way her mother taught her when she was 8 years old and the world had felt too big to understand. She took out her phone and called her lawyer. "Chica?" Amaka answered on the second ring. "I need you to prepare something for me. Tonight, what happened? I'll explain everything later. I need one document before morning." Amaka didn't ask twice. That was exactly why Chica had kept her for 6 years. "Give me 2 hours. You have 1.5. Here's what you need to understand about Chica before this next part. She'd spent 9 years learning the exact architecture of Obi's ego. Every beam, every load-bearing wall. She knew he needed to feel like the one making decisions, the authority in the room, the one granting favors, never receiving them. She was about to use that knowledge one final time. She went back up. Knocked. He opened the door already smiling. A smile that didn't know yet that it belonged to a dead man. "I was looking for you," he said. "I went to get some air." "Wedding nerves," she said, easy smile. "Are you hungry?" "I'm suddenly starving." His whole face lit up. "You know what I've been thinking about since yesterday? Your afe onugbu," his favorite, bitter leaf soup, made the way her grandmother taught her. "Go shower. I'll arrange something." She called room service herself, explained she was tomorrow's bride. Was the kitchen still open? It was. 45 minutes later, soup on the table, fresh gari, a cold Guinness Foreign Extra, the drink he reached for whenever he felt settled and celebratory. She lit the 2 spare candles from the bathroom shelf, set his plate down first, the way she always did. He came out of the shower in a towel, saw the table, and his face opened like a child's on Christmas morning. "Chica, you arranged all this? Tonight? The night before the wedding?" "A man should eat well the night before he gets married," she said, warm and steady. He pulled her in by the waist, pressed his lips to her forehead. "What would I ever do without you?" She placed her palm flat against his chest, felt his heartbeat, and thought, "You're about to find out." They ate, he talked. About the wedding, about a new contract he was negotiating, about how proud his mother was, about the future exactly as he'd arranged it in his head. She listened, laughed in the right places, refilled his Guinness when it dropped below the midpoint. When the plates were cleared and he was full, slow, and comfortable in that particular way a well-fed, satisfied man becomes. She reached into her bag and set a manila folder on the table between them. "Obi. Remember the commercial property I mentioned last year? The one in Woos?" His eyes sharpened, the way they always did at the word property. "The Abuja space, yes. My lawyer finalized it this week. I want it in both our names before we marry tomorrow, so it starts inside the marriage from day one. I've always wanted everything we build to be completely solid." A pause, her voice going warm. "That's who you've made me, Obi. A woman who wants to protect what belongs to us." He looked at her. Part gratitude, part hunger, completely unsuspecting. "Chica. You're too good to me. You know that? Sign wherever Amaka flagged." He opened the folder. He did not read it. In 9 years, Obina had never once fully read a legal document Chica placed in front of him. He signed because she told him to sign, because he trusted her execution without ever checking her work. He'd mistaken her thoroughness for service, her diligence for devotion, her intelligence for something that existed only to hold him up. He picked up the pen, signed the yellow-flagged lines, initialed every corner, signed the witness declaration, closed the folder, lifted his Guinness. To tomorrow. To tomorrow. She slid the folder back into her bag, and something shifted inside her chest. Not joy. Something quieter. Something that felt like solid ground finally rising up under feet that had been suspended over open water for 9 years without her ever quite realizing it. That folder was never a Woos property document. It was a full deed of reassignment, drafted by Barrister Amaka in 90 minutes flat, transferring both Lekki Apartments, the Abia land, the consulting firm directorship, and every co-signed financial instrument back into Chica's sole name, effective immediately upon notarization. Amaka had served as remote witness. A notary Chica had trusted for 4 years, confirmed it with a digital seal. Every asset Obi's name had ever touched. Legally, completely, only Chica's again. He had signed it himself, with the pen she handed him, at a candlelit table. After eating her soup, she gave it 30 minutes. 30 minutes sitting beside him on the couch, watching a film neither of them was actually watching. 30 minutes of being a woman who had already made her decision and was simply waiting for the moment to deliver it clean. Then she stood. "Obi?" He looked up from his phone. "I heard your phone call earlier. The one with your mother." The temperature in the room changed. "What phone call?" he started, cycling fast through confusion, calculation, forced innocence. "About the old cargo, about the properties. About the women you're planning to bring." He opened his mouth. She raised one hand, gently, like stopping a slow-moving car. "I'm not going to fight with you about it, Obi. I'm not going to cry. I'm not giving you the scene you're already bracing for. I just want you to know. I heard every word." She picked up her bag. "I'm calling off the wedding." Silence. Long. Heavy enough to weigh. Then Obi stood. And understand. The man who rose from that couch was not the man who'd cried in her arms on hard nights, not the man who'd kissed her forehead 40 minutes earlier. This was the man from the phone call, the one his mother knew. "Calling off the wedding," he said, slow, cold. "Chica, it's the night before our wedding. I know what night it is. You heard a phone call and you want to throw away 9 years? You threw away 9 years, Obi. I'm just responding to it." He exhaled, straightened, and here it is. The moment that reveals exactly who he'd always been underneath the performance. "No man is going to marry you," he said, his voice dropping cold, almost pitying. "You understand that? You're 37. Your mates have children in secondary school already. I was the one who agreed to marry you when everyone else had passed you by. And you want to walk away? Over a phone call?" Chica looked at him. Not with rage. Not with the kind of hurt that shatters. She'd already moved through all of that, 2 hours ago, beside a potted palm tree. She looked at him the way you look at something that used to confuse you. And now, finally, made complete and total sense. "Obi, I picked you up off the floor. Not the ground, the floor. When you had nothing. No car, no money, no apartment, no plan. I guaranteed your business loan with my own property and never told you, because I didn't want you carrying the weight of owing me. I opened doors with my name and stood behind you so you could walk through first. I put your name on everything I built before I even fully knew you, because I loved you enough to make you feel like you'd built it with me. She adjusted the strap on her shoulder. And what I learned tonight is that I did all of that for a man who sees me as cargo. Old cargo. She nodded once, slow, confirming it to herself. So, you say no man will marry me at 37. Maybe that's true. But I would rather build a beautiful life alone than shrink myself for a man who's disgusted by me. A man already counting which women he'll bring in before the wedding cake is even finished. She held his eyes one last moment, opened her bag, set the manila folder on the table between them, walked to the connecting door, knocked twice. Adais. Wake up. We're leaving. And began to pack. Obi opened the folder. Read it once. Read it a second time. You can't do this, he said, voice cracking, all the coldness gone. Everything in that document is legal, Obi, she said, not turning around. Your signature is on every page. Your initials are in every corner. Barrister Amaka has the original filed. You have a copy. Chika, her name broke in his mouth. She turned, finally, because she was human after all, and she saw it. The collapse of a man who'd believed, without question, that he was the most intelligent person in every room he ever walked into. She felt it, but she'd spent enough feeling for one night. Good night, Obi. Please tell your family the wedding is canceled. I'll handle my guests in the morning. Adais. God bless that woman. Had already zipped her bag before Chica finished the sentence. They left the hotel at 1 a.m. The Uber pulled away into the Port Harcourt night, and somewhere on that ride, Chica felt something she hadn't expected. Light. He called her 16 times in 3 days. She never answered. He called Adais. She answered once. Obi, this number is no longer available to you. Click. He drove to the Lecky apartment. Her neighbor, Mama Agatha, who'd watched him for years and kept her opinions behind her teeth, told him Chica wasn't home and closed the gate with a finality that needed no further explanation. His mother, the woman from the phone call, was furious at first. She called Chica's mother in Enugu, said things she'd later have no good language to take back, told her community that Chica was unstable, that she'd abandoned a good man at the edge of his happiness over nothing. Then the real details started moving. Not from Chica. She never posted a single word publicly. Not from Amaka, who stayed professionally silent. From Adais' friends, who talked. And within 3 weeks, the version of the story circulating through Nui and Lagos was not Obi's version at all. The community heard how she'd carried that man for 9 years, how he'd called her old cargo the night before his own wedding, how he'd already mapped out which women he'd keep on the side, how he signed his own undoing without ever bothering to read it, because 9 years of easy benefit had cost him the habit of ever being careful. There's a specific kind of shame in raising a son who's exposed, publicly, as exactly that. It invites questions with no comfortable answers. Obi's mother started leaving church before the final blessing, started shopping after the morning rush cleared out. There's no poverty quite like the poverty of a ruined reputation, and she was learning it in real time. As for Obi, those 2 lost clients represented nearly 40% of his revenue. Without Chica's network underneath him, he was back to pitching in rooms that received him politely and committed to nothing. Nothing of hers was left to leverage. Alone at 3 a.m., if he was honest with himself, he understood something most people only learn through real loss. The life he'd been living had never truly been his. It had been hers. Extended to him in love, received by him as entitlement. And now that she'd taken her hand back, the ground under him was exactly as solid as he had built it, which, it turned out, was considerably less than he'd liked to believe. Chica went home to Enugu, to her mother's house. The smell of pepper soup from the kitchen. Her father's old engineering textbooks still stacked on their shelf. Her mother bringing her sliced pap in the morning without once asking, "Are you okay?" Just sitting beside her in the kind of silence that comes from a woman who's lived long enough to know some things can't be rushed past, only sat with. Chica grieved. She wasn't going to pretend she didn't. She'd loved that man. Not the man from the phone call, but the man under the mango tree who told the truth because he was too tired to perform anything else. She grieved 9 years. Not with regret, but with the tenderness of someone who gave completely and got back. At least, the certainty that she was capable of giving that completely. That's not nothing. That's actually something worth knowing about yourself. But grief, for Chica, had always had one particular flaw. She knew exactly how to find her way out of it. On the 22nd day, she opened her laptop. 3 client inquiries. A referral from a property developer. A restructuring question from a small business owner. An investment conversation waiting in Abuja. Her portfolio was intact. Her business was intact. Her name was on everything that was hers. She made coffee, sat at her mother's kitchen table, opened the first email, and began. Chica Okafor Financial Consulting was restructured in the months that followed. She brought in a partner she'd known for years and expanded into property investment advisory, work she'd essentially been doing for free for half a decade without ever calling it a business line. By the end of that year, she had more than she'd had on the morning of the canceled wedding. Not out of revenge. Not to prove anything to anyone watching. Simply because that's what happens when a woman stops spending half her energy managing someone else's discomfort with her own success. She did not hate Obinna. I want you to sit with that, because it's the truest part of this whole story. She understood him in a way she wished she didn't. Understood that the man under the mango tree had been real, that his brokenness had been genuine, that some part of what they built together had been true and worth having. But somewhere between the flaw and the comeback, he'd let himself believe her contribution was owed to him, that her love was a resource to extract, that she was cargo, something to calculate, carry, and set down once it had been fully unloaded. That was a belief she could not carry into a marriage. There's an old saying in the East: the man who borrows a masquerade's costume for the village festival will dance beautifully. Everyone will watch. Everyone will admire. But when the drums stop and the costume has to be returned, the village finally sees exactly, and only, who he really is. Obinna borrowed Chika's masquerade for 9 years. He danced well. To everyone watching, he looked like a man who'd built something solid on his own 2 feet. When the drums stopped, the village saw, and Chica walked home into her own story, wearing nothing borrowed, owing nothing to anyone. That is where we leave her. Not in pieces. Not diminished. Sitting at her own kitchen table in an apartment that was always, and only, hers. Client email open. Coffee going cold beside her hand. A future that is entirely, unapologetically, completely her own. Some women run from the fire. Others walk straight through it, and come out the other side finally certain of exactly what they're made of. Before I go, 3 questions, because I genuinely want to hear from you. 1. Did Chica wait too long? Or did those 9 years give her exactly what she needed to end it perfectly, the moment it mattered? 2. That folder, that signature, was that brilliant, or did she cross a line? 3. If you were standing in that corridor, hearing every word through that door, would you have knocked right then and confronted him? Or would you have done exactly what she did? Drop your answer below. This community doesn't judge. We discuss, we think, and we learn from women who moved quietly and changed everything. This is Favi the Storyteller, where every story is a mirror, and every ending is a beginning. If this one reached you today, it was meant to. Share it with someone who needs it, and subscribe, so the next one finds you too.